Hello! Welcome back to my channel. These are my most anticipated releases of 2022. This is a series that I can't talk. Nailed it. Oh hey, water is trending. What does that mean? Which means it has to be like whispered, but kind of yelled, like a yell whisper. From page 1 is just jokes, and I'm so excited to go and get haunted. I meant to film this a while ago, and then I got sick and completely lost my voice, so this is out a little bit later than I was hoping to do, but hopefully there's still some titles on here that you haven't heard about yet, or that you're just also really excited to talk about with me.
Begin.
So I'm going to split this up into series that I'm continuing on with, where I've already read a book in this series, and then the second part is going to be debut novels, so either I've never read from this author before, or it's a completely new series or standalone from an author that I have read from. The first book in a series I'm continuing on with is Where the Drowned Girls Go by Shauna McGuire, and this is coming out on January 4th, so it should already be out by the time this gets posted. This is a series that I absolutely adore. It's all about portal fantasy and children who go through, say, the wardrobe, in Language in the Wardrobe, and they go into Narnia and then they come back to our world, and you know what, actually Narnia was a really good fit and they kind of want to go back there. So what do you do with those children? Well, they go to Eleanor's school, and there they can all kind of be around like-minded people. In this entry we should be getting into the other school, so this is for kids like, say, maybe Alice in Wonderland didn't enjoy her trip to Wonderland and now she's back in the real world. There's a school for those kids too. That's what we should be getting into in this entry, as well as revisiting one of the characters that we had in a previous novel. This is possibly the most beautiful cover that I've seen for this series yet.
Look at her. I would die for her.
You cannot convince me that that door doesn't look like a Hershey's bar. The next entry is Homicide and Halo-Halo, coming out on February 8th, and this is by Mia P. Manansala. I read Arsenic and Adobo this last year, and it was one of the first of the cozy mysteries that I got to read. I really liked this one. It's just really comforting to read. She's got a wonderful family and a great best friend and two very cute love interests who are just fully wholesome, and the whole thing is wonderful. I really liked the author's note at the beginning of the first novel that talked about some of the sensitivity reading and some different topics that were going to come up, including the law enforcement community and how the Filipino community might communicate with them. And then at the end of the book, she included a bunch of recipes as well. So the whole time you're reading about all these like Filipino recipes, and then there's some for you to try at home. I'm hoping the next one will have those as well. Possibly I'll even get to do a little vlog where I try one of the recipes and talk about the book. I think that'd be really fun. Coming out at some nebulous February date is Finlay Donovan Knocks Him Dead, and this is by L. Kazimano.
That went well.
No, it didn't.
And this is the sequel to Finlay Donovan is Killing It, which followed a suburban wife turned hit mom. She's a author and she's meeting with her agent in Panera, and somebody is very nosy, eavesdropping on their conversation like you do, and mistakes her pitch for her next novel as being that her job is as a hit woman. And so, you know what? They've got someone in their life that they'd like her to take care of.
The heck you say?
I thought that the whole thing was really lighthearted and fun, and I'm excited to catch up with these characters again. Next up is Fevered Star, coming out on April 19th, and this is by Rebecca Roanhorse. It is a sequel to Black Sun, which I read for the first time towards the end of this last year, and I just thought this was a really, really solid start to a series. I love all of the Colombian, early Americas type of mythology that was worked into it, the different cultures and communities and their religions, and I love that the whole thing is centered on this god of vengeance and just getting retribution for an act that was terrible that happened in the past.
Compels me though.
I've read another Rebecca Roanhorse book that didn't really land well with me, but this one, man, that first chapter hits you just right out the gate, and then the end really packs a punch as well. If you know, you know. So this should be a really solid entry, and I'm just excited to further explore the world, learn more about the magic system and the cultures that are there. On June 21st, we have Locklands, and this is going to be the third and, I believe, final entry in the Foundry series by Robert Jackson Bennett. The first book is Foundryside, followed up by Shorefall. I read Foundryside in 2020, and then I reread it along with Shorefall in 2021, and this is one of my favorite series. I absolutely adore this magic system. It's probably one of my most favorite magic systems that I've read. It's very programming based, and the heroes in particular are practicing a lot of hacking. There is a little bit of design and creation as well, But for the most part, these heroes are hacking into pre-existing systems and finding the weaknesses, busting through the securities, and making these objects function to suit their needs. And it's all set in kind of a fantasy Venice. There's a lot of undertones of like capitalism and eat the rich, and I thought it was really, really well done. I'm very invested in this world and this magic system in particular, and I do like a lot of what's happening with the characters, and I'm not sure how he's going to be able to wrap the whole thing up in one more book, but I'm down for the ride.
Don't do anything stupid.
On July 12th, we have A Prayer for the Crown Shy, and this is going to be the next entry in Becky Chambers' new series of Monk and Robot. The first book is A Psalm for the Wild Belt, and this book just hit me at the right time. It had so many sweet affirmations that I really needed to hear in my life.
If being delightful was a crime, you'd be breaking the law.
It felt like going on a little tea party with Uncle Eero, and he's just warm and envelops you in a hug and tells you that you're doing just fine and it's all going to be all right. And it was so wonderful for me. I know it's incredibly short, but man, it really, really said the right things at the right time for me. So I'm very excited to read more from Becky Chambers and to continue on in this world. I think that the world building is really interesting and unique. It's very minimal. It's very in the background. I'm not even sure I'd really say that this is character driven because I don't feel I really learned a whole lot about the characters and their relationships in the first entry, but it was just so warm and hopeful that I would love to read more. Also coming out in July on the 26th is Master of Iron by Trisha Levenseller. This is the sequel to Blade of Secrets, and I really enjoyed this. It is a YA fantasy. Normally I don't gravitate to or care as much, get really invested in the YA series that I'm reading, but this one was just so much fun. It was 100% YA. It fully does all the tropes and things, and it feels like a YA book, but it also just feels so lighthearted and silly, and I loved being in this world with these characters. So what happens is the main character, Ziva, is a blacksmith, only she's not your regular blacksmith. She's able to imbue the weapons that she makes with some kind of magical ability. For example, she might be able to imbue a flail so that as you swing it over your head, all of the enemies within a certain radius are going to have their breath sucked out of them. So it's got some really interesting ideas and unique little attributes. I really enjoyed those creative inputs. But what I'm most associated with is that Ziva suffers from social anxiety. She is terrible around people. She doesn't understand it. In the beginning of the book, she's even thinking she's probably possibly Aro Ace. She doesn't really understand how people get into relationships or feel attraction to other humans. She has her sister who runs the shop and does all the dealings with people. Essentially, it's her emotional support human who does all of the things that need to involve other people so she can just be in her safe space in the forge making weapons and doing what she does and loves best. However, while she's making a very high-profile weapon for somebody, she catches sight of a new boy in town through the window, and oh, he's attractive actually.
Wow, my eyes hurt so bad from your beauty.
And so that ends up affecting how she's imbuing the weapon because it's not always perfect. She doesn't get to decide exactly what the ability is, and if she doesn't have a clear picture in her mind, the magic kind of does as it will. And it ends up creating this very powerful weapon, and she has to go on an adventure to make sure that it doesn't end up in the wrong hands. I loved all of the playful banter and the silly relationships, and I just thought it was so warm and sweet and fast to get through and just a really good fun. So I'm excited to go back to this world. I think in the next book it's going to mostly be taking place in a forge. Ironically, despite a setting and a plot that has a lot to do with fire, this second book is actually a hammer in water. And the author has a really good sense of humor about it. She posted on Goodreads. I hope you guys love the cover for this one as much as I do. When I asked the team why the weapon was in water, they informed me that water is trending. So there. And this has become a new favorite phrase in our household, especially if it's raining outside. We'll just look at the window and, oh hey, water is trending. What does that mean?
Well, that doesn't make sense.
Coming out sometime nebulously in September is the final entry in The Drowning Cities by Andrea Stewart, and this will be the Bone Shard War. This is the follow-up to Bone Shard Daughter and Bone Shard Emperor that already came out, and I love this magic system. I read Bone Shard Daughter in June of last year. I was just blown away. It's one of the most original fantasy series that I've ever read. I love the magic system, I love the world, even just like the geography that weather events, the animals that are there, these are all really unique features that I haven't seen elsewhere. And I really look forward to the unique plot lines that come out of this and seeing where that's going to continue to take us. I liked the developments that we got through in the second book. I thought it was a really good sequel, and it didn't really suffer from middle book syndrome. There's a couple of things that I wish had been handled slightly better, but overall I got more of what I wanted, and I really look forward to seeing the next one. On September 13th is Nona the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This is going to be the third but not final book in the Locked Tomb series.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
This started with Gideon the Ninth, followed up by Harrow the Ninth, and what a ride. Gideon the Ninth is one of my favorite books. I reread it to get ready for Harrow, and honestly, I was just laughing so much and pointing out phrases to my husband. I couldn't keep them to myself. I had to say them out loud because they just need to be repeated. And this is one of the few series that not only did I get him to read it, he read the sequel before I did. I think he's at 3 times for Gideon and 2 times for Harrow. And there's at least one quote in here that we say all the time at home to each other, especially because it's in really tiny font, which means it has to be like whispered, but kind of yelled, like a yell whisper. This has a fantastic sense of humor in this series. You're following from the point of view of Gideon in Gideon the Ninth, and she is stuck on this dead-end planet. She doesn't really have anything to do except for read her dirty lady magazines and practice with her sword, do push-ups, have incredible biceps. And the whole planet is run by Harrow, who is kind of her enemy. They really don't like each other. And Harrow ends up needing her to act as her cavalier. This is somebody who uses a very small sword, a rapier, which is unlike the two-handed beast that she likes to wield, but at least it's a sword. And they need to go on a quest. They've been summoned to the first house to do something unique that other necromancers haven't had the chance to do. And Harrow, as a necromancer, is very excited for this opportunity to kind of live up to her potential. Things don't go as planned when they get there. There's a lot of mystery, it's dark, it's creepy, it's weird, but also a lot of humor underlying the whole thing. And then Harrow the Ninth goes in some wild directions. It is very difficult to understand for the first 300 pages because the author is doing something very unique, but I think it's going to be incredibly rewarding going back on a reread now that you finally understand everything that's going on. She had originally planned for this to be a trilogy, but then, no, realized actually there's some other stories that are here to be told in this world. So at a minimum, we're getting 4 books. This will be the 3rd one, and I absolutely love it. It's so much fun. There's a ton of jokes and references embedded in it, even just silly internet memes that you wouldn't expect to be there, like the left pizza with none beef. That shows up in this crazy sci-fi necromancers in space world. So if you like something fun and rewarding and original, but maybe a little bit difficult to get into, it takes some time that you have to commit to actually understand this world, I absolutely think this one is fully rewarding. On September 15th will be the 3rd and as of yet unnamed Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. This is a series that follows some retirees who are very old but very much not dead yet. They are interested in the dead though, specifically cases that haven't been solved yet.
What makes you think it was murder?
So every Thursday they meet in their community center, they rent out one of the rooms, and they go through some recent cases, finding little clues, seeing if they can solve these murders that the police weren't able to solve.
Okay, we got footprints here.
In particular, there's one member of the group who is very mysterious. She's got a history, she's got a past, because she can get things done. She knows things that your average citizen really shouldn't. And so it's a whole lot of fun. It's very silly and heartwarming. There's some great characters. I really liked book 1, and then when I read book 2, The Man Who Died Twice this last year, it became one of my favorites of the year. It was so funny. From page 1, it's just joke, 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 and I found the characters really endearing, and I loved them so much. I didn't think I would. After the first book, the murder is pretty good in the first book. The characters are pretty good in the first book. I'd say the second book, the murder and the plot and everything is maybe a little bit less, but the characters... It starts off in the very first chapter with Joyce asking her friends, I've been thinking about getting an Instagram or a dog. What do you guys think? Because, you know, those things are so very similar. Then they have a whole conversation where, well, you could get a dog, but then what if you die first and leave the dog behind? That's not fair. Maybe get an old dog. Beat the system that way. So it's very funny and quirky and charming and just a lot of humor spread throughout. I really love his writing and I'm very, very excited to go back for more. I'm trying so hard not to reread that book immediately, but man, do I already want to. Lastly but not leastly, on November 15th, we have Brandon Sanderson's The Lost Metal, and this should be the final book in Mistborn Era 2. I read Mistborn Era 1 in the end of 2021 during December, and I'm reading Mistborn Era 2 at the end of this month. I fell in love with this. I think that it is some of the best writing that I have ever seen, precisely in the setup and payoff category. I knew about one minor detail during my read of the first series, and just seeing how he was able to craft that detail and draw your attention to it in very slight ways without making it seem out of place, but also always pairing that information with another paragraph that let you know a little bit more about the world. He didn't have to spell it out, but slowly weaving these items together. It was just incredible to watch that kind of mastery and how much he had planned already. And so I'm so excited to go back and reread the series now that I know everything that happened and just see all of those little clues built in early on, and to continue on with this next bit. It really reminds me in a lot of ways of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra, and I love the magic system, I love the world building, and seeing the mastery of his craft that he's able to execute in this series is really, really a joy to read. So those were all of the sequels to series that I'm really excited to be continuing on with. These are going to be the books that are new to me. First up, on March 22nd, we have The City of Dusk by Tara Sim. This is described as a world of bone and shadow magic and vengeful gods and defiant chosen ones. There are 4 realms: light, death, life, and darkness, and all of them converge on the city. Each of the different realms has its own god, and each of those gods has an heir. But the gods have withdrawn their favor from the city, and now everything is dying. And this just seems very dark and gritty. It's going to be the first entry in a series. It's got a lot of my buzzwords with the dark magic, the shadow magic, and all of these gods. So I'm really excited to see where we go with this one. Next up is The Bone Orchard by Sarah A. Mueller, and this is also coming out on March 22nd. In this, we'll follow Charm, who is a witch. She takes care of the bone trees at Orchard House. But that's not her only job. On Tuesdays, she's also the mistress of the Emperor. And the Emperor has a task for her. He's on his deathbed, he's dying, and he wants her to figure out which of his terrible 3 sons is the one who murdered him so that they can make sure that he doesn't get the throne. This seems incredibly dark and interesting. It's following Charm, who is the last in a line of conquered necromancers. She's trying to take care of her children. There's a murder mystery element to it, even though the murder victim isn't quite dead yet. Early reviewers have been calling this a lush and gothic whodunit.
I found that alluring.
And talking about how much it focuses on trauma and violence and political violence, and personal responsibility versus collective responsibility. And it just seems like it has a lot of really rich themes and topics that it delves into. And it's only a standalone fantasy novel, so I think it's really going to have a lot of interesting things to say and the room to explore them and be able to tie everything up in one neat package without having to set up any kind of sequels. This is possibly the read I'm most excited for to come out this year.
Yes, he's good. I can tell.
On April 26th is Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. I really, really enjoy T. Kingfisher's works. I actually became familiar with her as an artist in high school when she was just going by the name Ursula Vernon. T. Kingfisher is a pen name that she uses for some of her works, especially if they're not her children's works. And I absolutely love her art. She used to write these really long stories to accompany it, and I would spend hours on DeviantArt reading about a chicken named Henrietta and this silly painting that goes along with it. And so I've been following her for a really long time. I was so excited to learn when I came back to reading that she's published a bunch of books now.
Tell me everything.
And some of them have become my favorite. In particular, I really, really loved Raven and the Reindeer, which I read last year. And it's just this fantastic retelling of a classic fairy tale that turns a lot of the tropes on its head, but has a lot of humor and lightheartedness and life that it breathes into it and new things to say. Her horror hasn't hit as well for me so far, so I'm hoping that this seems more of the fairy tale type of story and I'll really connect with it. In Nettle and Bone, Mara has to complete 3 impossible tasks in order for a grave witch to give her a tool which will help her kill the prince. Along the way, she's joined by a reluctant fairy godmother, a former knight, and a possessed chicken. Honestly, You had me at Grave Witch. I need to know what that is. That's a fantastic term, and it already paints such a picture for me. But the lighthearted nature, the fairy tale, and the demon-possessed chicken are all major selling points as well. On May 17th, we are getting The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah, and this is going to be the first in a series. This is listed as a retelling, and I'm curious if it's going to be a retelling of Aladdin or a little bit of 1001 Arabian Tales, but either way, this is going to be a Middle Eastern-based story. We follow along with a thief and her djinn bodyguard. She's in the trade of black market magic, finding these items and then reselling them. And she catches the eye of a cowardly prince who needs her in order to track down a magical artifact. The land is barren, it's been a long time, and this artifact should be able to help restore the land. However, it will come at the price of losing all of the djinn. This sounds like a really beautiful tale. It's also being put out by Orbit, and they publish some of my favorite adult fantasy novels, so I think that it'll be really well crafted and interesting at the very least. I'm hoping that this one will be filled with a lot of creative and unique magic, especially drawing from cultures that I'm not familiar with, so it just feels a lot more original and new. Either way, I'm happy to hear from more voices that we don't often get to hear from.
I agree.
Last but not least, on June 14th is The Path of Thorns by A.G. Slatter. And this one is also tied for possibly my most excited novel. I read her debut, All the Murmuring Bones, this last year, and it really went under the radar. I loved that book. If you're somebody who likes fairy tales and that kind of classic style of story, but you're a little bit tired of reading all the same Cinderellas and Sleeping Beauties and Snow Whites over and over again, this is a fantastic read. She takes a family that has... Honestly, now I'm just going to go talking about a book that's not even the one that I'm anticipating. But it was a really great read, and it involved dark mermaids with teeth. In fact, all of the fantasy characters that we meet along the way would kill you if they get the chance.
Dude, that is macabre.
There's kelpies, and there's ghosts, and there's mermaids, and it's all really beautifully done. It has some of the most beautiful writing that I read throughout the year, as well as the highest number of vocabulary words that were new to me. In this second book, we're following a governess who goes to a remote estate to take care of 3 small children. All she's brought with her are a sea chest and a large carpet bag that she will not part with. Eventually she becomes indispensable to the man of the house by being able to provide certain potions, but also there are creatures and specters that are haunting the estate. There are locked rooms, portraits missing from the walls, and names that have been removed from the family Bible.
The go calls to us.
All of this feels like a very lush goth setting, and especially knowing her first novel and the kind of gothic feel that that one had, this one seems really compelling and mysterious, and I'm so excited to go and get haunted. So those are the books that I am most excited about reading that are coming out in 2022.
Mission accomplished.
At least as of now. A lot of the titles that come out towards the end of the year haven't been released yet, so I reserve the right to change my mind.
What can I say? I'm a rebel.
But for right now, these are the ones that I really, really want to read. Tell me what books you're most excited about reading this year. Are any of these titles ones that are on your list as well? Are some of these new to you? Are you interested in checking them out? Let me know. Comment down below. Also feel free to like and subscribe. Now that I have my voice back, I'll be putting out videos more often. I'm aiming to do them twice a week, but we'll see how that goes, especially in case I get sick again. Anyway, Happy New Year, and I hope you guys have a fantastic reading month. Hi, bud. Oh, hi. Now there is Cat. Hi, buddy. Yeah, you had to be in it too. Huh. Is this what you wanted?
Expects to be credited as director of photography.
Mm-hmm.